Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at PolyRoll for the Nintendo Switch. PolyRoll is an interesting game that, besides being something that looks like an obvious nostalgia grab, is actually trying to blend two main gaming franchises, being the Sega Sonic games, as well as those iconic Mario games. But before any die-hard fans of either the Sega or the Nintendo series cringe too hard, when we actually get into the gameplay, it's worked out pretty well. As we would expect from any platforming-based game, the story and player motivations are pretty light and very straightforward. More or less, PolyRoll's Poly Pals have been abducted by the big bad boss man, and it's up to our main character and our hero PolyRoll to beat the boss and get them back. And it's this light yet very traditional motivation that's going to drive the player through over 35 levels across 11 different worlds and through 11 different boss battles. As you would expect in the actual gameplay for a blending of the popular Mario and Sonic franchises, there is the iconic speedball roll, but the game itself actually focuses much more highly on the active control of platforming and jumping. Though you can at times curl up into your destructive speedball and break through walls or shoot off ramps to launch yourself across the screen, instead of the hyper-focus on the extreme speed from the Sonic franchise, more of the platforming from the Mario franchise is more the stable gameplay. Each of the levels is pretty short and pretty straightforward, but kind of like the Sonic games, there's going to be gems instead of rings to collect, and throughout each of the somewhat intricately designed levels, there's going to be large golden gems to find that'll help you unlock certain bonus stages. And while it is fairly easy to make it from the starting point to the ending goal in each of these short levels, finding all of those gems is actually pretty difficult. But if you happen to see one as you blaze through the level, it might be worth your time to stop and see if you can figure out how to get to it, because as mentioned before, these golden gems are actually used to unlock certain bonus stages. Bonus stages in PolyRoll, as opposed to the standard level that you'll play through to make your way to the end of the game, don't really offer much combat, but will definitely challenge your skills and reward you with an extra heart for your HP gauge. But thankfully, unlike these bonus challenge levels, the other 30 plus levels in the game are not subject to a timer. You can take as long as you want to make your way from the starting point to the finish, and take as long as you may need to find any extra gems. Because much like the original Sonic franchise, gems in PolyRoll act like rings in Sonic and help you maintain your health. But while bouncing back and forth from platform to platform and collecting gems or rings or any other trinket is pretty much par for the course for any typical platformer, where PolyRoll really starts to shine is in its boss battles. Across the 11 different worlds in PolyRoll, there are 11 different and very unique boss battles which will rely on the character's instincts as well as their grasp of game dynamics to be able to confront the boss and move on. Each boss will take multiple hits, and considering environmental damages and boss's attack patterns, it's going to take even a skilled player a good while to get a handle on exactly how to trump the boss. Thankfully though, while the regular levels don't exactly offer any sort of a checkpoint system, the boss room acts as its own checkpoint. So while the boss fights themselves might actually be fairly challenging, it doesn't punish you and make you play the game over, and gives you as many tries as you might need to be able to learn the boss's patterns and eventually beat him and move on. If you do die at any point playing through PolyRoll, whether in a regular level or in a boss room, you will start over with 1 heart. Thankfully though, collecting gems allows you to refill your heart gauge within levels, but even in boss rooms, a multitude of gems are provided, so if you do start over with 1 heart, the more skill you gain as you play, the more likely it is that you can work to refill your heart and still beat the boss, even if you do start over with only 1 heart. And in all honesty, it's little touches like that that made me really enjoy playing PolyRoll, because even though you could lose ground by dying, you never felt terribly punished or like you just couldn't win because you happened to die at a certain point. Moving on to the graphics though, it's obviously a bit of a nostalgia play using between 8 and 16-bit graphics to represent all the characters' levels and the overworld map. But even though the main character sprite itself does seem a little bit blocky, the controls and the movements are really sharp. The game's music also has a really nice nostalgic feel with a fairly diverse soundtrack. Moving on to the game's critique, in all honesty, there's really not much to pick apart in a solid classic old-school arcade-style platformer. The main mistake that a lot of indie games have, which is copying a genre and not really adding anything new, PolyRoll has also introduced its own new features. Throughout your gameplay, collecting gems, trying to get the big yellow jewels to open up bonus areas, you'll also encounter certain special abilities. And whether you find them in the game or at the end of each level is kind of a bonus roulette. You can open up features that fundamentally change the gameplay, such as floating down like a feather after a jump or being completely invulnerable to spikes. or other unique abilities like being able to lob grenades down on your enemies as often as you want. And while none of these abilities are strictly necessary to make it from point A to point B in each of the individual levels, the deeper you get into the game, the more you'll be required to use these abilities to access certain special areas. And that, in and of itself, also is a point of praise, because the deeper I got into PolyRoll, the deeper the game actually got. So all in all, I'd have to say, if you are a fan of classic platformers or arcade-style games, or you're just in for another retro indie, PolyRoll is definitely a game that you want to have on your radar. It's simple and straightforward, and its blend of all-out speed with high-accuracy platforming is something that I didn't really expect. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of PolyRoll, now on the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw me a like or a comment to show your support. And don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There are new and unique indies coming out literally every single day, so there's always going to be some new game to find out about right here. But anyway, this has been Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.